Good to be in the Lord's house this morning. I did forget. I finally get to announce the secret that I've been trying to keep. We have another baby that's going to be coming to the church, and no, it's not me and my wife again. Every time I say that, everybody thinks it's me and Sue. It's not us. Miss Brooklyn and them have been keeping a secret. Everybody in the family's been keeping the secret but Miss Rosie. So if you have something you want everybody to know, you tell Miss Rosie, and she opens that up. So they're going to be welcoming another little girl. So we're excited to have that this morning. More than one way to grow a church. I was joking when I said that a couple months ago and said y'all need to get busy having babies, and now we done had two more. So sorry if y'all wasn't wanting another one. It might be my fault. But it is good to be in the Lord's house this morning. If you would, take your Bibles, go to the book of Matthew. Matthew first, and then we're going to jump over to 1 Kings, and we'll pick up our person, I guess, there. Our next person in the lineage of Jesus Christ. We'll pick up there with them, and we'll study what the Lord has for us this morning. We sang one of my favorite songs this morning, Because He Lives. When I was growing up, there was an older man out at Herkin. His name was Brother Roy Dillard. I won't ever forget him. He would sit on the front right corner of the pew. We used to have two sections of pews. He would sit right there, and Wayne Warren would sit right there. And then when we built the new church out there, they had three sections of pews, and they sat on either end of the middle section. But it never failed when you sang that song, Because He Lives, he was going to get up. I mean, he had his walker and everything, but he was going to struggle to his feet on that walker, and he's going to wave that hand, singing Because He Lives, because he knew one day when death gave way to victory. And he was waiting on that day, and he's gone on to be in heaven now. And death did give way to victory. One of my favorite old songs there. I can't help but think about him every time we sing it. But if you've got your Bible in Matthew chapter number 1, we'll begin reading verse number 1. The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat Judas, or Judah, and his brethren. And Judas begat Perez and Zerah of Thamar, and Perez begat Esrom, and Esrom begat Aram, and Aram begat Amminadab, and Amminadab begat Nahasson, and Nahasson begat Simon, and Simon begat Boaz, or Booz, of Rechab, that is also Rahab the harlot there, and Boaz begat Obed of Ruth, and Obed begat Jesse. And Jesse begat David the king, and David the king begat Solomon, of her that had been the wife of Uriah. And Solomon begat Rehoboam, and Rehoboam begat Abiah, and Abiah begat Asa, depending on how you would like to pronounce that. But I want to look this morning specifically in verse number 7 at the first line, Solomon begat Rehoboam. Now Rehoboam, you might not recognize that name, and that's because that's the Greek version of Rehoboam. Rehoboam, you'll find him in 1 Kings chapter 11. So if you would, let's turn over there, and we'll pick up in our reading. And we'll preach what the Lord has on our heart this morning here out of the book of Kings. 1 Kings chapter 11 this morning. I'd like to preach a message here dealing specifically with David, then Solomon, and then Rehoboam. Rehoboam here. And of course, I'd love to really flesh out Rehoboam and his life, but to be honest, his life was kind of decided before he even got on the scene. That'll make more sense as I preach it this morning. But what Rehoboam is going to go through here goes right back to Solomon and what Solomon did in his life. And it really piggybacks off one another. So I'd like to preach a message this morning focusing on these individuals. Well, you see here in the text that because of what King Solomon has done, his son is going to pay for it. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse number 1, I preached last week on the one word that ended Solomon. And it was that first word there in verse 1, but King Solomon loved many strange women. We realize that's going to be one of the great faults of Solomon there. We talked about Solomon and all of the great riches that he had and how much gold that he got there in a year's time and all of his wonderful things and how that he built the palace and he built the king's house. He did all these great things there and built the temple. He is known for all of his great works and his riches and his wisdom and everything. But then that little but came in right there, and those strange women began to lead him away, and he fell in victim there by worshiping those gods. In verse number 9, and the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned from the Lord God of Israel, which had appeared unto him twice. And had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods. But he kept not that which the Lord commanded. I don't know if the Lord has done this on purpose, but as we're preaching through Judges and Matthew, it seems like we're preaching the same thing every single time, and it's simply this: just do what God tells you to do. If we just do what God tells us to do, we'd be a whole lot better off. If these individuals could have just left those strange gods, those little g gods alone, they'd be in a lot better place. But we see that they can't seem to do that. They can't seem to get away from those things and leave them alone. But I would like to preach here kind of a story of three different generations if I could. We know David here as a soldier. David was a great soldier. We know his story. He came on the scene there. He fought Goliath. Then he became captains over all of these thousands of men. And everybody fell in love with David. And David took the kingdom from Saul because God gave it to him. And he's a great man of war. He's a great soldier. Matter of fact, does anybody remember why the Lord told David he could not build the temple? Anybody remember? Too much blood on his hands. He said, you've been a man of war. You're a man that has shed too much blood. You can't build the temple, but I'm going to let your son build the temple instead. So David was a great soldier. Can I put it to you this way? David put in all the work to get the kingdom in the shape it was for Solomon. Is that fair? He did all of the work, clearing out all of these individuals that did not need to be there, really setting things up. And even when the Lord told him he could not build the temple, does anybody remember what David did? When the Lord told him he couldn't build the temple, did David just go in the corner and sit down and pout, or did he prepare things to build the temple? He prepared things to build the temple. You find, if you study your Bible, he actually went in and he began to get all of the materials and things lined up for Solomon to be able to build the temple. In David's mind, when he took his last breath, he had done everything he could to prepare the kingdom for whoever came next. He was getting things ready for Solomon. He had in his mind, in this mindset, that he was going to do all of the work so that the next one in would have an easy job. When I was at the materials lab over in Batesville when I first started with MDOT, I'm big on writing stuff down and remembering how to do things. So I would learn how to do something. When I did, I would go through and I would make a step-by-step guide on how to do whatever that might be, adding different materials to a job or samples. And y'all ain't curious about all that this morning, so I don't go into it. But anyways, I wrote down all of these how-to guides, and I made a folder on my computer called Material Lab for Dummies, because that was me. So I wrote down how to do every single thing that I could possibly remember. And then I knew that I was coming to the New Albany Project Office, and a new EIT had come in. That's an engineering training. Didn't have his 4-year test done, and his professional engineering exam was not done yet. So he came in under me, and I said, I'm fixing to make your day. I'm fixing to make this job so easy for you. He said, how's that? I handed him a flash drive that had my Materials Lab for Dummies folder on it. I said, anything you need to know how to do in this job is in this folder. And he texted me back a couple of weeks later and said, dude, this thing is awesome. He said, everything I've got to do is step by step in this. I said, you're welcome. Tell me thank you more and more and more, because I deserve as much work as I put into that thing. It was hard to get it ready. But what I was trying to do was make it to where the next person that came behind me had an easier job doing that job. What has David done? David said, I've ruled the kingdom. Saul was the first king. He's kind of made a mess of things towards the end of it. We know the stories there. David has come in. God is with David. He's the man after God's own heart. He has prospered him. He has blessed him. Has he made mistakes? Sure, absolutely, we all have. But the kingdom is in pretty good shape when David goes off the scene. We remember the only question was of which one of his many sons was going to be the next king. So he lines all that out there and puts Solomon on the throne. And when Solomon inherits the throne, we know that God asked him what he wants. And he prayed for wisdom instead of riches or long life for his enemies and all those things. And God blessed him for that. So we have David that has really cleared the way. I need you to get that this morning. David has cleared the way for Solomon to step in and take the kingdom. And because the work had been done with David, when Solomon took over the kingdom, guess what? The kingdom exploded into wealth and prosperity. Fair? Everybody got that this morning. He has done all of the work for Solomon to come in and step right into this thing. And can I put it in words that we might understand this morning? David set it up to where Solomon could have the silver spoon. So that when Solomon became the king, it's like David just said, here it is, big boy. Anything you could possibly want. It's all right here. Everything is ready to go. You're in pretty good shape. All you got to do now is not mess it up. All you got to do now is not mess up all the work that has already gone in to make the kingdom the shape that it is in now. So you have here that David is the soldier that has gone in and cleared the way. And then Solomon, you have, I put him down this way, and I hope that I'm not making anybody mad, but I put him down as Solomon the spoiled. Solomon the spoiled. Because he enjoyed all that was already done by David, but what did Solomon do at the end? He let things go slack. And then his son, Rehoboam, is going to come in, and I've labeled him Rehoboam the sufferer. David the soldier did all the work, cleared it out. Solomon came in, enjoyed all of it. He did some work too. I'm not saying he didn't. He enjoyed the majority of it. He had the prosperous kingdom. He became the nation that everybody else was looking towards, the ruler that everybody was traveling to come and see his wisdom of. And then after that, when he falls in love with these strange gods and all these things, in 1 Kings 11, when he goes down that path, he is going to have the kingdom taken from him, and Rehoboam is going to pay for it. He's going to pay for what's happening. So let's read verse number 11. 1 Kings 11:11. Wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon, For as much as this is done of thee, now hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, what I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. Notwithstanding, in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. What son? Rehoboam. Rehoboam. David did the work. Solomon enjoyed how good things were until he lost it, and now Rehoboam has got to pay for it. So what I've done here is I'd like to preach a message this morning simply on this thought. Will you leave a legacy or lose a legacy? Will you leave a legacy or lose a legacy? Because that's exactly what Solomon had to pick between this morning. David had set things up. He was on the right path. Solomon steps in. The kingdom just explodes, and it's so prosperous. Everything is so good. If he would have just done what God asked him to do, if that verse number 1 where it says, But King Solomon loved many strange women, if that had not taken place, where do we think Solomon and the kingdom of Israel would have been at? That was the thing that killed it. That was the thing that made him lose all that they had gained. That was the reason right there. That one verse is what is going to eventually lead to the kingdom splitting off and going from one unified nation there of those 12 tribes there. When he goes from that and it splits off, and now you're going to have the 10 northern tribes of Israel, and then you're going to have Judah and Benjamin are going to link up, and they're going to be the 2 tribes that are split off of that thing. The whole divided kingdom, all that's going to happen, going down this big old snowball of events is about to happen, all took place because Solomon could not do the one thing that God wanted him to do. Be faithful to me. Be faithful to me. He said in verse 10, I commanded him concerning this thing that he should not go after other gods. And that's what he did. He went after them, and because of that, all the work that David did, all the good things that Solomon has got, is now going to go out. It's going to be gone. It's going to be of none effect anymore. And Rehoboam is going to be left with nothing like his daddy had. When I was playing baseball at North Pontotoc, every single year, Coach Anthony, he would try to come up with some little saying that they would put on the back of our practice shirts. Sometimes they were pretty good ones. One year he put on there, I'm in the business of winning and business is good. Put that on the back of the shirts. And then we proceeded to go like 13-13 that season, so business was not very good for us. We didn't have a great season. But another year he put something on there, and I can't remember what it was because it wasn't a very good one. But I remember the last year, my senior year, he put on the back of that shirt, Leave a Legacy. Leave a legacy. And he got everybody these little wristbands to wear, and they said, Leave a Legacy on there. And it was our senior year. We all wanted to do good, but he really pushed and challenged us to make sure that when we graduated, we left a legacy of hard work and dedication behind for all those coming after us. He wanted us, we had 9 seniors my senior year. 7 of us started. We'd been playing together since T-ball all the way up. It was our last time to play ball together. He said, you got a chance to do something big. I want you to work as hard as you can and leave something behind for everybody else to follow. Leave a hard work and dedication. Everybody that gets up and they come to practice the next year, they ought to be able to say, hey, those other guys did it like this, so we're going to work hard like them. They used to go and we get to practice early, so we're going to be at practice early. Because everybody was looking at the seniors to try to be like us and try to do like us. Poor souls. I don't know why they would pick to do that and look at us and be like us. But they were trying to emulate everything that we were doing, and they were trying to follow that legacy that was going to be left. That's what Coach Anthony pushed us to do. What has Solomon got the chance to do here? He is sitting on the greatest throne to ever exist. He is the wisest king to ever exist. He is the world power at that time. Everybody is looking to him. He has got everything that he could possibly need. And if he would have just stayed straight in that, Rehoboam could have come in and inherited that type of kingdom. But instead, he let it all go because he messed up. He could have left a great legacy, but instead, he lost a great legacy. He lost a great one. Brother Easton, what's this got to do with me? Okay? I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you asked. Every one of us right now has got an opportunity to leave something behind for who comes after us. You might be sitting here this morning. You might be the 5th generation Christian sitting on these pews. Are you going to be the last generation? Or are you going to keep going? Are you going to lose that great Christian heritage that you've got and your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents has built for you? Or are you going to lose it and be the last one in your family that's got it? Because it's happening every single day. People are taking what they've got and they are throwing it away. How in the world could something like this happen? You'll find, first of this morning, that there's some old enemies that are coming back. 1 Kings 11, verse number 14. The Lord stirred up an adversary unto Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was of the king's seed in Edom. You'll find that while David was still ruling and Joab was there in Edom, he was killing every male. In verse number 15, he had smitten every male in Edom. For 6 months did Joab remain there with all Israel until he cut off every male in Edom. Then Hadad fled, he and certain Edomites of his father's servants with him, to go into Egypt, Hadad being yet a little child. And this Hadad is going to end up finding favor in the sight of Pharaoh, and he's actually going to get to marry the queen's sister. You'll find it in verse 19. He marries the queen's sister there. And then in verse 21, when Hadad heard in Egypt that David slept with his fathers, and that Joab, the captain of the host, was dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me depart, that I may go to mine own country." What's he going back for? He's going back to be an adversary to Solomon. He's going back to be an adversary to Rehoboam when the time comes. He's been stirred up by the Lord to go back. He's an old enemy that David and Joab thought that they had gotten rid of, but now he has come back. Then you'll find in verse number 23, God stirred him up another adversary, Rezon the son of Eliada, which fled from his lord Hadadezer, king of Zobah. Verse 25, he was an adversary to Israel all the days of Solomon, besides the mischief that Hadad did, and he abhorred or hated Israel and reigned over Syria. And in verse 26, in Jeroboam the son of Nebat, an Ephrathite of Zeradah, Solomon's servant, whose mother's name was Zurah, a widow woman, even he lifted up his hand against the king. And this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Millo and repaired the breaches of the city of David his father. Verse 28. And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor. And Solomon, seeing the young man, that he was industrious, he made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. And it came to pass at that time, when Jeroboam went out of Israel or Jerusalem, that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him in the way, and he clad himself with a new garment, and they too were alone in the field. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him and rent it in 12 pieces, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he said to Jeroboam, "Take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, Behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and I will give 10 tribes to thee. But he shall have 1 tribe for my servant David's sake," that's Judah, "and for Jerusalem's sake," that's Benjamin. Benjamin owned the city of Jerusalem. It was in their inheritance. "The city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, because they have forsaken me, and have worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in mine eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgments, as did David his father." Solomon, you're fixing to lose the kingdom. You've worked hard. David worked hard. He cleared it out. You inherited it. It was in good shape, but because you didn't do what I told you to do, you're going to lose it, and your son is going to pay the price for it. You had a great legacy to keep up, but instead you're fixing to lose that legacy. You're about to lose everything that God has set up for you. These old enemies have come back. But then I'd like for you to see that there's some old habits that open the door to ruin. Solomon went for strange gods. You would have thought we'd have learned this lesson throughout the days of the Judges. As we've been studying through that some on Sunday nights, and it's been a little bit since we've been there, but almost every single time, and the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord and went after strange gods. Happens over and over and over. The Judges, if you're not familiar with your Bible history, you had the time of the patriarchs there. You had Abraham, Isaac, you had Jacob, you had those guys, you had Moses, and you had Joshua. And then you go into the time of the Judges where they would do wrong and God would send a judge to deliver them. And then after the time of the Judges, you have the kings. That's when King Saul comes about there. It's right after the period of the Judges. So all these folks know in their history how that every time they go after one of these strange gods, it causes them trouble. But they fall right back into it again. It really goes to prove that saying that I love so much. Hard times create strong men, and strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. That's exactly what is happening to the kingdom of Israel right now. David is a great, strong man. He came in, he created good times for Solomon. In the good times created, Solomon is a weak man at the end. And then a weak man is going to create hard times for the nation of Israel that is now about to split off again. David had this kingdom fixed. He had cleaned it out. He's a man of blood, so that Solomon didn't have to be. He put in the work, and Solomon took the silver spoon and gave it away. My papa, we've got a bunch of family land down there that we all kind of share on. And years and years and years ago, him and two of his brothers went down there, and they had bought an old D7E dozer, if I remember correctly. This thing's so old it's bore hydraulics. It has a cable lift on the front, and that's how it worked, was a cable winch to lift that blade up and down. And they went in and they cleared all the hardwoods out of that bottom, and they opened it up in the field so that they could graze cattle on it. And then when they quit grazing cattle on it down there, they decided we're going to plant pine trees on it. So we put erosion control pines around the creeks and the ditches, and then we started planting the rest of the fields in soybeans. And just in the last 3 or 4 years, we couldn't get anybody to plant soybeans on it. So Papa decides we're going to plant all those fields in pines. And it just about broke his heart. He said, I can't believe I spent all that time and all that effort to go down there and clear all them fields out so they could be used just for us to come along in the next generation and plant pine trees in it and undo all the work that I did. It's pine trees right now, by the way. And if you've never dealt with a clear cut after you cut your pine trees, your hardwoods down or something like that, you might as well just leave it alone for 15 years so all the stumps rot, and then the trees are big enough to try to claim it back again. There ain't much you can do with it. If you're curious, the last estimate I got, the going rate for clearing land after a clear cut, getting rid of all the stumps, was $1,000 an acre. That's a lot of money. I don't care to pay that. So we didn't pay that. So we took that nice, pretty clear land and all the work that was done, and we undid the work and made it where we can't use it no more for soybeans. What has Solomon done? He took all the work that David did. He took all of the clearing that he did. He took all of the people that had gotten kicked out of the kingdom and all the peace that had been brought because of David and the work that he did, and he took all of that, threw it away, and he let it go. Because David had left a legacy for Solomon, and Solomon took the legacy and instead let it go. Instead of leaving that legacy for Rehoboam, he's lost that legacy. David had done all the work only for Solomon to let it go. Solomon gave this away. The king Solomon inherited was so prosperous it was the envy of the world at that time. He was on top, but he gave it away. Think about the work that David did. Where did David come from? What was David? The very first instance we ever hear about David in our Bible, what was David doing? Somebody help me. Tending sheep. He was tending sheep. He was a shepherd. David, from the very bottom, a lowly shepherd. So bad. Do you remember the Egyptians when Jacob there, when they came back in? Remember that Joseph got sold into slavery. He goes into Egypt. On down the line, he's number 2, only below Pharaoh, and he sends back to get his family to come into the land. And they go in before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh gives them the land of Gozan. Oh man, that's not right. I can't remember the name of it. Y'all forgive me, it's not in my notes. But he gives them the best of the land, Goshen. That's it. He gives them the land of Goshen so that they can go and they can dwell there. But when they came before him, there's a little part in the text, and I can't remember how the Bible words it, but it says to let him know that you're shepherds. And the reason that Joseph instructed his brethren to let Pharaoh know that they were shepherds was because shepherds were an abomination in the eyes of the Egyptians. And because of that, he knew that they would give them that land because they didn't want them to dwell amongst them. How about that? There's your little bit of nugget of history for you. But even the Egyptians looked at shepherds as an abomination. All throughout the Bible, the shepherds are looked down as these lowly, dirty, rotten foes. They're looked down on, but guess where David came from? The very bottom. He came from the lowly shepherd to a military man, to beating Goliath, to being the one that has stolen the hearts of the people, to sitting on the throne. Can I say that David went from the very bottom? He took the family name here, the family name of Jesse, the family name that's going to be David, of the tribe of Judah. He took that family name all the way from the bottom and he built it up, and he worked his whole life for it to mean something at the end, only for Solomon to come in and what could have been the leading family for generations. A great legacy that could have been had. He let it go. He let it go. Sue's papaw, Mr. Jim. You wouldn't know it if you saw him and talked to him. He's got a 5th grade education. He quit school in 5th grade, couldn't even read. He went to go work and help his daddy. He used the Bible to teach himself how to read. 5th grade education. So don't tell me the Bible's hard to read, by the way, if that's what he learned to read with after 5th grade education. But he used the Bible to learn how to read, and he took what he learned and what work ethic that he had, and they built a construction company called Hall's Construction. And in case you're wondering, that company is now feeding the 4th generation of people in that company from somebody that was a 5th grade dropout. You know what he did? He did a whole lot of hard work. He worked and worked and worked, and he did all the stuff that nobody else wanted to do, and he sweat and sweat and sweat, and his body went through the ringer because he wanted to leave something behind for his kids, and he made something out of nothing. How many of us in here would have thought somebody that only had a 5th grade education could go on and do something like that? Not many of us. We live in a time today where if you don't go to college, everybody looks at you and thinks that you ain't got any sense at all that you couldn't make it to college. That's ignorant. I went to college, but I don't believe that. I don't think that's right. Because I'll tell you this, I went to college for the paper. Most stuff they taught me in college, I'm not using today. Just the way it is. But he worked so hard to leave something behind. And then his kids have worked. And now his grandkids are working. And now the great-grandkids, the food on their table is because of something that he did 60 years ago, making that company. What did he do? He went from the bottom and he built something up, and he left a legacy. But at any given time, in the middle of that, all it took was one generation to say, I don't feel like working, I don't feel like doing, I think I'll just sit back and take the handout, and we'll let that legacy die and be gone. My papa didn't retire until he was in his 80s. He was in the school business. He was a coach, and then he was a principal. And the whole time that he was doing that, he was working part-time at Sardis Lake as a park ranger. And he would go to school, and then he'd leave school, and he'd go and he'd work the graveyard shift at Sardis, and he'd come back, and he'd sleep a little bit, and he drove a bus for Barclay Travel down there, and he's done all these things, and he's worked, and he's worked, and he's worked, and he's worked. Said he was going to retire at 70, and then it was 75, and then finally, after he was 80 years old, he finally hung it up, and he said, I've worked so long so I can give my family something. You know what he's doing? He had that old-timey work ethic right after the Depression when he was born in the 30s. And he worked and worked and worked and said, I'm going to make sure I have something to leave behind that is worthwhile. But guess what? He's left something great behind for us. Something that is benefiting everybody in the family right now. But we could take his effort and we could say, nah, that's not for me. This work's not for me. This effort's not for me. And we could hang it up. And all that he's done for us could be gone. All that he's done for us could be lost. See, we've got a great legacy, but we could lose a legacy. Your family's got a legacy. If you're here this morning, you've got good, godly heritage, you ought to praise God for it. You ought to be so thankful that your parents drug you to church. You ought to be so thankful that they got you there even when you didn't want to be there. That was me. I was bad about that. I used to take my Sunday afternoon naps and pretend that I was asleep so that they'd leave me in the bed and I didn't have to go to church. That was me. I wasn't saved yet. Y'all forgive me. I was rotten in my flesh, and so were every one of y'all before y'all got saved too. The Bible even tells us our righteousness is as filthy rags. Not our unrighteousness, our righteousness. So the best that we can do is filthy rags. I don't know if you ever thought about that or not. That's a little tidbit for you. I'm trying to tell you this morning, just like Sue's papaw and my papaw, David worked so hard and went through so much heartache and so much bloodshed and so many battles to leave something behind for Solomon to enjoy. And Solomon did for a while until he decided to let it all go. Until he decided that it was time for it to be gone. You see, we've got things that folks have left behind for us, and if you're not one of those individuals that had somebody leave a legacy in your life, if you're not here at church this morning because your parents or your grandparents brought you, you're here today because you're the first one, congratulations. You're the David of your family. You're not enjoying that legacy, but you're building that legacy. You're building something right now that can benefit your family for the rest of its known existence. You see, Solomon here, he has given it away. He has given away everything that David has worked for. And some of us have gave it away as well. Not only in the secular sense of the word, and how about the spiritual side? When I was still out at Herkin, there was a boy that got saved. I'm not going to say his name. He got saved and he surrendered to preach. And his family was rough, really rough. So rough, as a matter of fact, that when he surrendered to preach and said that he was going to quit doing all that they were doing, he was going to quit living in that sin that they were living in, and he was done with it, they cast him out. And he had to go to the church, and he lived in the prophet's chamber at the church for several months till he had something set up. Why? Because he decided to go with God instead of this world. He decided it was worth more to go there. And then after that, he's decided to try to build something up, and he's trying to build a legacy there. I've told you before about the individual that goes out to Locust Grove that was from Louisiana, and he said he had to leave because it was so bad for his family down there, all the witchcraft and the voodoo and all the wickedness that's down in that area. He left and came up to Locust Grove to join up there because he needed to get his family into something else. He said, we're the first generation, and we're trying to break the generational curse of sin, is what he calls it. We got to be the first. You know what he's done? He has worked and worked and worked. He's done the same thing that David had. He has worked and worked and worked to try to leave something better. How many times have we seen somebody climb out of that and try to do better in their own life and get away from the things that were holding them back and the sin and the wickedness of their homes and deal with all the abuse that they've gotten? I'm thinking Miss Adasa, there's one of those ladies there that lives in Pryor, Montana on that Crow Indian reservation. I've told you about her before, but she doesn't want to go back to that school, and she actually wants to come and live in Mississippi because it's so wicked out there, and she wants to be somewhere down here where she can go to church. You think it's hard to get people to come to church down here? Everybody loves church down here. This is God's country. You try going into a place where you invite somebody to go to church, and their own families are looking at them and telling them they don't need it. They tell them if they do go that we're going to kick you out or we're going to ridicule you. But there's people all across this land that have gone through that very thing. They're the first ones who have decided that they're going to quit all of that and go with God. And they're having to deal with it. They're having to deal with all the persecution that goes alongside of that. They've worked so hard to get out of that. They've worked so hard to get out of those sinful, wicked homes. A person who grew up in an abusive drunkard's home that swears never to drink again only to have their kids fall back right into it. A lady that grew up with her mom cycling men through the home so fast she never even learned their names. Promised herself it wouldn't ever happen to her only to see her sweet little girl follow the same path. Brother Easton, stuff like that happens? All the time. All the time. Now, I'm not so proudful this morning to think that it couldn't happen to me or to one of you. I beg God that it doesn't. I pray every night nothing like that happens to me. But I know good preachers right now whose families have been broken because of things just like this. They've done everything they could to leave a good legacy. But instead of keeping that great godly heritage and that great legacy that's been left behind, the next generation has lost it. They've let it go. I don't know where we fit this morning. You're either the one leaving the legacy or you're the one that's got the legacy right now, can choose if you're going to lose it or if you're going to keep it going. We're either the Davids trying to be the pioneers and set something up for our family, or we're the Solomons and we have to choose if we're going to keep it going or we're going to lose it. And if we do, then we're going to have a Rehoboam one day that's going to have to deal with it. But not only if some of us give it away, you'll find that we do have something to shoot for. 1 Kings 19:4, I'm going to read it for you. This is Elijah here. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a juniper tree. And he requested for himself that he might die. And he said, "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers." You ever caught that tail end of that verse? I'm not better than my fathers. He ought to be getting better. What should we be doing this morning? We ought to strive to get better. We ought to strive to be a better Christian, a better person than those that came before us. We ought to know more. We ought to study more. We ought to do everything we can to make this place better than it's ever been before. I want this church to be the best that it's ever been here in this generation. Brother Easton, all you do is push and push and push. I do push and push and push. And I'm not so blind that I don't see that. I push and push and push, not because I'm a drill sergeant, because I want our best for this church. I want this to be the best that it's ever been before. If the height of Beulah Baptist Church was 40 years ago, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves for it not being today. We ought to get better and better and better. He says that I'm not better than my father. He says, just end it now. Just let me die right now, because I'm not any better than all these that came before me. We ought to be better. Instead of David being the height there and Solomon letting it go, what would have happened if Solomon would have kept things straight here and he would have finished out his life living on top? The kingdom that he would have handed to Rehoboam would have been one unlike the world has ever known. But instead he let it go. Child of God, it might be that you've got a great legacy in your life and you've done some wonderful things and you've lived your life well. But now you got to do like Paul. You got to finish well. You got to finish well. You can't go and go and go and then right at the end say, all right, that's enough. And then just quit and go to the house. You can't do that. We have to keep going and keep pushing. But here at the end, you'll find all the work that David did was gone. All the battles that he won, all the unification of the nation that he had brought was gone. All the heritage that he had left for Solomon was gone. And then when Rehoboam comes on the scene, I wonder, little Rehoboam, as he's growing up and he's looking at the throne that his father Solomon is sitting on, and he's seeing the prosperity of the kingdom. He's growing up dreaming and thinking, one day I'm going to have that. And then when it finally was his to have, it wasn't like that anymore. You see, this morning, I just want us to remember and take the time to remind us that we've got something great. We have had our families leave us a great legacy. This church has had a great legacy. I don't know of any other church in the area that's older than one that started in 1848. I thought Hurricane was an old church. It started in 1886. Started as an L-shaped building. They couldn't even afford 4 walls and a roof, so they put up 1 wall on this side, 1 wall on that side to block the wind and have a little bit of shade. I thought that was a great story, but then I came here and realized this church was from 1848. You want to talk about a great legacy that's here at Beulah Baptist Church. Will this generation keep that legacy, or will we lose it? Your family is here this morning because you've had a great legacy and somebody has brought you to church and somebody has prayed for you and got you into the church house. Will you be the last generation? Or will you keep that legacy going and get the next generation here? Ladies, as you come this morning, your family might be in the same shape as the height of Solomon's reign, but will it stay there? Or 10 years from now when we look up and say, what happened to so-and-so's family? What happened to them? I used to see them at church all the time. Things used to be so good for them. I don't ever see them anymore. Never hear anything from them anymore. They loved God. They were there all the time. They were doing so well. And now all I hear about is the bad things that are happening to them and the sin and the wickedness in their life. If Solomon had stayed true, where would the kingdom have been?